Hello everyone, hola and welcome to this new section of the course, JavaScript. That's right, this is the start of the real programming because as you know, both HTML and CSS are not, well, if you combine them, you can make a programming language, depends on how you do define a programming language. If you combine both CSS and CSS and HTML, you can indeed make something that can be considered a programming language. But this is the real, like the first proper programming language, the only one, of course, that we are going to learn in this course. This section is perhaps, in my opinion, going to be perhaps the hardest one if you have never programmed before, because until now with HTML and CSS, we have just defined rules, right? But with JavaScript, things are going to get a little bit more complex because it's not just about defining rules. We are going to define like whole logics that will affect how our applications behave. So this is just the introductory lesson, so it's going to be a very short one, but if you go to the introduction, one thing that you must know of JavaScript is that, well, multiple things actually. First, is one of the most used and most demanded programming languages out there. The main reason for that is that it's the programming language that is used to make web applications, and as you know, especially now with the metaverse and all that stuff, the web is becoming a big thing. I mean, it was a big thing since the 2000 more or less, but now with all the things that are coming, it's getting even bigger. And JavaScript is generally the language that is used to create web applications like this one. Notion is made of JavaScript, and all the web applications that you visit, no matter what, are made of JavaScript. The reason for that is that there are multiple types of programming language. You can actually distinguish between three big families. First, the compiled programming language, and that is a programming language that you know that, remember, a programming language, we saw that in the beginning, is nothing more than instructions that we give to the machine, so that the machine, no matter if it's a computer or a smartphone or a tablet, can do things for us using the processor, right? And there are two kinds of programming languages: the compiled and the compiled are languages in which you write the code and then you compile it and you generate something that is either a .x file or .dll file, the kind of files that you would find in your computer if you go to the, if you open the file explorer and you go to the this PC whatever, and you go to file programs, and here you will find a lot of these kind of files. You find other things, but .x, .dll, and yeah, these are basically files that have been compiled from code and you can execute directly. You don't need anything else to execute this. These are instructions that are ready to be sent to the processor of your computer without doing anything else. So you can simply double click on .x and it will execute the software, and your computer will know what to do. But that is not the case of JavaScript, because JavaScript belongs to the second family, which is interpreted languages. And that means that you don't generate a compiled version of the instructions. Instead, when the user accesses the application, you give them the code with the raw code without compiling or anything. And then the user has a software whose mission is to interpret that code line by line and send the instructions individually to the processor of the machine. And you may ask, okay, but I don't have anything like that. I mean, I can just access a web application and it just works. I don't need any software. And that is not correct, because indeed you need a software to access software application. You need a browser. You need either Google Chrome or Firefox or something like that. You cannot open a website directly in your computer. And this sounds obvious, but the reason for that is because websites are mainly made of JavaScript. You need a JavaScript interpreter, and this is exactly what web browsers are. Web browsers are JavaScript interpreters. So each browser has their own interpreter. I believe Chrome has V8, and you can look for that in like V8 JavaScript. Yeah, and this is the interpreter that Chrome includes. There are other interpreters out there, and the idea is that whenever I access a web page, I get all the contents of that web page, and I can show you that. If I open the developer tools, you remember we used this in previous modules, and if you go to sources, you will find JavaScript files in here, and even though they are processed and optimized so the web page is more efficient, but the thing is that all the code is here. All the code of the applications that you generally navigate is here, and you can see the code directly, and you can interact with that code directly in the web page, because that's how interpreted applications work. You get the code, and you have a software whose sole mission is to interpret the code line by line. It's like something similar. Imagine that when making a dish, to make a dish, in compiled languages, I give you the recipe in a paper that is ready, so you can directly read it and you don't have to worry about anything else. In interpreted languages, I read you the recipe line by line, and you don't know what comes next until I read you that. So generally speaking, compiled languages are more efficient than interpreted languages, because interpreted languages need to be converted line by line before execution. Of course, with time, this difference is not that great, and I mean it's getting smaller. And also there are ways to make to hack that, so to say, to make it faster. But the thing is that generally speaking, that's the main difference between JavaScript and other languages like C and C++. If I said there are three families, the third one is a mix. It's like languages that are not that neither are compiled nor are interpreted. They are like a mix. An example is C#, Java, I believe. It depends on which languages we are talking about, but basically those languages are pre-processed, and then you have to process them before execution in the end. I'm not that familiar with that, but yeah, keep in mind the takeaway of this lesson is that browsers are nothing more than JavaScript interpreters. And this makes sense because JavaScript is an interpreted language, and you need a software in order to execute that. And that software is a web browser. And yeah, this is what we are showing here. And yeah, JavaScript follows the ECMAScript specifications. This is the let's say organization that defines how JavaScript is and what rules does it have. So if JavaScript is in some way similar to IFC because it has versions, and with new versions you get new features and you can make more stuff with the syntax. So yeah, if you navigate to the ECMAScript webpage, you will see different versions of JavaScript, and you will see what each version includes. Generally speaking, all the versions are backward compatible, meaning that they never invalidate previous syntax, but they add new features to make the programming experience better. So the only worry that you have to have, and I don't know if we will talk about that in this course, perhaps a little bit in the tooling part, but the only thing that you have to be aware is that don't use features that are like too modern, because that those features need to be implemented by the browsers, and it might be that if a user is if the user that visits your web application is using a old browser, they won't be able to execute that part of the code. But those are, don't worry, we will talk about these topics. Don't be afraid. In the end, this is just something very easy to solve. But yeah, takeaways: JavaScript is an interpreted languages. Web browsers are JavaScript interpreters, and JavaScript is determined by the ECMAScript specification. So yeah, that's it. Enough theory. Let's dive right into this wonderful, amazing, easy, and exciting programming language. See you in the next session. Bye bye.